Mr. President, in a few minutes, I'm going to ask unanimous consent for the passage of the bill. In the interim, I'd like to yield some time to my good friend, Senator Wicker.
I think, my friend, Mr. President, I seek recognition to speak on the same matter that Senator Burr has raised and will raise on the unanimous consent request. Think of the economy right now, Mr. President. Inflation is at 8.3% or higher. Our GDP is shrinking and supply chains have not recovered from the pandemic. The last thing we need is a shutdown of this nation's rail service, both passenger and freight, and yet that is what we are facing in less than a day and a half from this moment. A massive rail strike that will virtually shut down our economy. Now, this didn't have to happen, but I'll tell you, it's been going on for since 2019. So we're in our third year of this matter. There's been negotiation among the rails, some 37 companies, including 7 major freight carriers, and 12 unions. They reached an impasse, and so pursuant to statute, the President of the United States, President Joe Biden, appointed a PEB, a Presidential Emergency Board, to help resolve this issue. And they brought the parties together and have worked with the suggestions from both sides, both labor and management, and come up with their recommendation, which the President of the United States has endorsed in full. And we are now at the point where we're asking both labor and management to agree to this recommendation of the PEB. 100% of management has agreed to this recommendation of the Biden-appointed Presidential Emergency Board. Of the 12 unions, 8 of the unions have agreed. So we have an overwhelming majority of the unions agreeing to this and 100% of management agreeing to it. But under the law that Congress in its wisdom passed years and years ago, we have to have 100% of the 12 unions, and there are 4 holdouts at this point. Pursuant to the statute, when we get to a situation like this, Congress can step in, and that is what my friend is going to ask us to do in just a few minutes. The Congress can pass the recommendation of the PEB in full. The Senate can pass it, send it over to the House, send it to the President, who has endorsed the recommendation in full, and we can avoid this strike. And that's what we ought to be doing. So I want to commend my friend from North Carolina for his leadership in this case. If the train stopped running, our economy grinds to a halt, and that is the very reason this law is in place, and it's the very reason why it is incumbent on us as senators and representatives to pass a statute, to pass a resolution implementing the PEB. And I yield to my friend.
Well, I thank my colleague from Mississippi. Mr. President.
Senator from North Carolina again.
Mr. President, there are going to be some that say this is unprecedented by the Congress. In fact, under the Rail Labor Act, Congress is allowed to intervene. In fact, Congress has intervened 18 times in the past, imposing PEB recommendations in whole or in part 4 times. If we don't do it, if we do not force this issue, at 12:01 tomorrow night, the railroads will shut down, and the economic impact on the American people is $2 billion a day. $2 billion. Senator from Mississippi and I have introduced a bill that will adopt the Biden administration recommendations that include a 24% increase in pay, paid retroactively in 2020, annual bonuses of $1,000, and additional paid leave. This is what's been negotiated by the PEB board, but as Senator Wicker said, there are holdouts from a standpoint of some of the major unions, even though 8 have agreed to it. Now, as I said, Congress has taken this action 18 times to intervene in 12 different rail disputes. And it spans back to 1982, and the latest was in 1991. So I dare say there are only a few that are in this body that were here when that happened. Now, Senator Sanders is on the floor, and I know he's going to object. And I know he's going to object because I read his tweet this week. It said this: Congress shouldn't stand in the way of railroad workers going on strike. The rail companies have avoided bargaining, abused their workers, allied with the same forces who killed the Biden agenda in 2021. Now they want Congress to support their greed. Don't. Sounds very similar to the argument he was just making to Senator Scott about student loans. It sounds very similar to every argument he uses, that there's this thing in America where nobody's speaking up for some. Listen, this is the president's bipartisan emergency board that he set up that came back with a recommendation to the Biden administration and said, here's the solution to this. It should be adopted. This is really weird that Senator Wicker and I are on the floor introducing legislation that supports the president's position and the position of the president's emergency board. Now, here's the key thing. This is the takeaway. We don't have to be here. Senator Schumer, at any point, can place this legislation on the floor. Clearly, Senator Sanders would object then. But let me make a promise. If Senator Schumer needs votes, I can deliver 48 Republican votes to implement the PBB recommendation and the Biden-endorsed position. Now, let me say that again, because I want to make sure Senator Schumer's staff understands. This is about how you get to 60. I don't want to give a 101 of the United States Senate, but 60 votes, as the president knows, is required. I'm offering him 48. He only needs to get 12 on his side to have 60 votes, to take this up, to pass it, to have this over with. And there's no interruption. Not only is it $2 billion a day in economic impact, this is 160,000 train loads of agricultural product at a time of harvest across this country. There are some that say, well, this isn't going to affect me. They haul coal, they haul gas, they haul petroleum, they haul gases like helium that are required for manufacturing businesses. They haul auto parts, which means you're going to see auto assembly plants that shut down, not because of China, but because we let the railroads workers go on strike and not support the president's position. So, this is not political. This is Republicans supporting the president's position and only asking 12 Democrats to support this action. I asked my colleagues, drop this concern that you're representing one side or the other. Ask yourself what's best for America. We just got a report that inflation's 8.3%. 8.3. Food up 0.7. Housing up 0.6. Yeah, gasoline was down. I think everybody expected inflation numbers to go way down. 8.3%. Wages aren't keeping up with that. Every American family is losing money every month. And now we're going to tell them, you're going to pay more because food's going to be scarce. Commodities are going to be scarce. Some things aren't going to be delivered. If we thought that the port chaos that we saw last year was bad, we're going to see a complete shutdown of rail, and we're just a matter of months away from Christmas when most retailers are counting on that product to come in. There are ports like Seattle and LA. What are they going to do with the containers? You talk about ships staying out at ocean. Amtrak canceled their east-west rail coverage today, going forward. Carriers have already stopped hauling hazardous waste because they didn't want to get halfway down a line and not be able to secure the hazardous waste. We're at a real tipping point on this. And this can all be solved by either no objection to the unanimous consent request or by Senator Schumer bringing this to the floor, knowing that he's got 48 Republicans and he only needs to produce 12 to get to 60. This is a really easy thing. It's an easy lift. Well, my hope is that we'll take one of the two paths. But do understand that in less than 48 hours, at 12:01 Friday morning, the likelihood is without action by Congress, there will be a strike. And rail traffic will stop, period, end of sentence. So at this time, Mr. President, as if in the Senate legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration of S.J. Res. 61 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the joint resolution be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.